morning, everyone. My apology, we're a few minutes late. We'd like to call our meeting to order for Thursday, April 4th. This is our second meeting for agriculture, or third meeting, I believe. Declaration of interest? None. Confirmation of minute 2 and minute of March 7, 2019 of the Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee. Okay, thank you. Item number 1, amendment to the engineering report for the Van Gaal Municipal Drain, and we have speakers on this item, so we'll hold item number 1. Item number 2, amendment to the engineer's report, O'Keefe Municipal Drain, Block C, Station 0020 plus 234. So we have no speaker for O'Keefe Municipal Drain on the item. Carried. Thank you. Item number 3 is Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development Department 2019 work plan, and we have a presentation from our staff. Is that correct? So we'll hold item 3. Item number 4, settlement of appeal to the official plan amendment 150 Natural Heritage System schedule. Is the item carried? We have no speaker on. Thank you. And we do have folks to speak to us at the open session, at the open mic. Is the Rural Youth Mental Health Project. So we'll wait. And also we have the Ottawa wind concerns. So with that, we'll go to item number 1, and I think we have a staff here, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of this meeting is it's an official meeting under the Drainage Act. It's the meeting to consider the engineer's report for the Van Gaal Municipal Drain. The Van Gaal Municipal Drain is it's a Section 78, so it's an improvement to an existing drainage works under the Drainage Act. And the engineer of record is Mr. Andy Robinson, who's here with us today. There are a couple of speakers, as I understand, that have concerns with the report, and so perhaps you'd like to hear from them.
They promised me they're going to change the sound system. So, thank you, Mr. Ryan. Yes. So we'll go to the folks who sign up to speak on the Van Gaal drainage, and we'll hear from our resident. First, we'll hear from Daniel Loach. Yes, you can press the button, Daniel, and you have 5 minutes to and bring the mic closer to you, Daniel, so we can hear you properly.
Everybody hear me okay?
That's right, thank you.
Excellent. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of council. My name is Daniel Loach, and I own, along with my parents, the property located at 6305 Perth Street in Richmond, Ontario. I'm here today to make it perfectly clear that the land developer's alleged assertion to the city that all agreements are in place is totally false. My lawyer, Joshua Moon, has provided committee members with a letter confirming my opposition to the current plan. A similar letter was delivered to the city's engineering firm last week. Several years ago, the land developer stated he was going to dig the drain deeper and take the property out of floodplain. Based on the current plans, that was a complete fairy tale. The current plan proposes to take all of my property on the east side of the Van Gaal Municipal Drain plus a large swath of land from the west side of my property. And according to the engineer that I spoke to, it's to build a stormwater retention pond on my land. Now you're going to ask yourself, if a land developer wants to build houses, why doesn't his plan consider a storage plan on the land to be developed? And the answer is quite simple. Well, let's get the city to take the land from someone else and leave more land to build houses. There's 28 acres. It's all open farm field. It's a blank slate. I'm just the unlucky one that has the drain running through my property. Current proposal will leave at least a 12-foot deep pool of water approximately 2.5 meters from my barn and possibly eliminate or compromise my freshwater well at the front section of my property. The impact of this loss of land on the market value of my residence will be significant and will undoubtedly have a negative effect on mortgage renewal requirements and homeowners' liability insurance. I also have concerns about safety issues for children on my property. I don't want to be liable in case a kid falls in it. This is the information I've been told, that it's going to be a stormwater retention pond. Okay? 5 minutes ago, the developer mentioned to me that the information I'd received is completely false. I don't know who else to turn to. I will be losing approximately 14 mature trees. Some of these trees are 40 and 50 feet tall. This is unfair and part of my reasons for opposition. None of you guys on committee, and ladies, would want the city to come onto their land without compensation and cut down 14 mature trees that provide a lovely buffer between the street and my land, all to assist the developer. To add insult to injury, the city is also recommending a special assessment for property owners along the drain because it is supposedly an improvement. And I don't see how this is an improvement. It's not an improvement in my case. To the best of my knowledge, the drain's worked well for over 35 years. The current proposal is neither a repair nor a maintenance issue. It is a significant modification which benefits only one individual, the developer. Why should the city ask other taxpayers to pay for modifications to the existing drain that benefit only a private sector developer? In the past, the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority has indicated, to the best of my knowledge, that as a homeowner, I am not allowed in any way to modify this Van Gaal drain that runs through my property in any way, bank height, width, and depth. They further indicated there's a fish environment in the drain. And when I phoned the RVCA after I received the envelope in the mail with the little thumb drive from Robinson Consultants that explained that this meeting was going on, I called the RVCA and said, hey, have you got a copy of this? And the person I spoke to, I think it was Hal Stimson, I've got it in my notes somewhere, said, no, I haven't received this. I've never consented to this project. The consent form that the developer has was signed by my ex-common-law spouse. She is no longer on title. The people on title are myself and my parents, Bert and Susan Loach. Any stormwater retention pond should be moved to the north. It should be located on the land to be developed, not mine. I did not consent to the proposed works. The proposed work is neither a maintenance nor a repair to the existing drain. It's the creation of a stormwater retention pond on our property. This is the information that I've been given. This is how the documents read. If any works are approved, I should be fairly compensated for any of my land that may be required for this project. I'm currently going to receive absolutely nothing, and I'm going to lose my trees. Potential recovery, if any, under the Drain Act is totally inadequate. We're dealing with a prime residential property with a two-car driveway access to the main street in Richmond, Ontario. Compensation should not be based on farmland prices. Thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate any questions that you want to ask.
Thank you, Daniel, for your presentation. Any question from my colleague? No, okay, thank you, Mr. Loach. Thank you. Loach, sorry. Featherstone. The next speaker is Doug Featherstone.
You gotta turn it back on. Just press it once. Wait, now it's on.
It's on.
You're good.
Red light. Okay, my name's Doug Featherstone. I own the property to the north of the proposed subdivision. And they want to do some of the drainage work on my property as well. And I have concerns about, having the drain turned into a stormwater management design, because I don't know how that's going to affect the drain or what I can do with my land down the road and the floodplain that could possibly be on it from this. And I also have concerns about keeping the public off my lands. If they're gonna have this wide drain going through there, it's gonna be, people are gonna be using that for paths, walking dogs, and dirt bikes, and four-wheelers, and snowmobiles. And how do you keep them off my land from causing damage to my crops? And with the ditch, it's just gonna be full of poison parsnips and other noxious weeds, and I'm wondering how they're gonna maintain that. And I don't agree with the value that they're assessing on my land either. And they're going to be doing, the work they're gonna do may damage some of my tiles, and they'll have to be maintained, and I'm concerned that it's just gonna hold water, and we're gonna lose the flow and not have outlet for drainage. And that'll just back up everything and flood us out, so I don't know how you're gonna maintain that that's gonna work. So those are my concerns for now. Thank you very much.
Okay, Andy, thank you. Any question? Councillor? Yeah, just press it. Okay.
How much of the property, are you an active farmer currently?
Yes, I am.
And what percentage of your property would be affected by this, with the stormwater retention pond?
The ditch runs right along the edge of our property. The ditch is actually, right now, part of the ditch is in our property, and they want to make this a bigger ditch and make it into a stormwater management plan, which is now it's just a ditch to flow.
And how would it affect what you do and what you grow?
They're going to take a parcel of my land, and yeah, I don't know. That's my question. As long as they can maintain flow.
Are you on a well?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Loach is on a well as well?
Yes,
Well as well?
yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Hmm? And septic, and you as well? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Any other question for Mr. Featherstone? No? Thank you. Our next speaker, Mr. Anderson. David Anderson.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to go on record to say that I do oppose this. I'm an owner of Lot 18, share that. And I just want to go on record saying that I oppose the future costs that I would have to pay as a owner for this drain, number one. Number two, I disagree with the boundaries for the drainage. I have met with Lauren, and we've walked my property. And he's, explained things to me with the LiDAR. But I still disagree with the drawings on this. And so, for the record, I just want to say I oppose. And I'll take any questions if...
Okay, Dave, thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Councillor Moffat's going to ask you.
Just want to make sure you're aware of the process for, if you have a concern with the engineer's report in terms of your assessment or how the boundaries are, you're aware of the process for that, for appeals and with court revision and tribunal and whatnot?
Yes, that's correct. I've been informed. Lauren actually explained that to me.
Okay.
But I just wanted to go on record at this time
No,
to
that's
speak, and
important.
that's my objective was this morning.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Our next speaker, Catherine McLaughlin.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning.
Je m'appelle Catherine McLennan et je possède un terrain marécageux. Est-ce que tout le monde me comprend? Okay. I own a land, a conservation wetland of 100 acres on lot 18 and 19 of concession 5. And I bought it 10 years ago in order to keep it that way. I don't own a house on it, there's nothing on it, to keep it that way for the next generation. So as you can imagine, to hear that there is a drainage, doesn't make me too happy. I have a sanctuary of wild birds, cranes, wild goose, ducks, and so on. And my idea was to keep it that way. I am very concerned. I don't know what's going to happen to that. Of course, I'm wondering if everything has been done without me knowing, because I didn't know anything until I received that note of telling me about this meeting.
Councillor Moffat has a question for you, if you don't mind.
How long have you owned the property?
About 10 years.
10 years? You were aware that the Van Gaal municipal drain existed before? Or did you not even know there was a municipal drain on your property?
Well, my land was not drained.
No, I get that. That's the thing. So if the municipal drain hasn't been affecting your land
No.
negatively to this point,
Yeah.
it's unlikely that the update to the drain would affect your land at the point where it is, because that's not the purpose of the work. It's improvements downstream to provide better outlets.
I
for
don't
future
understand why I get an incentive on my taxes to keep that land wet, and then all of a sudden you are changing it.
Have you had a chance to speak with the engineer about the
No,
impact?
because I just, like I said, received that letter. I was surprised, and I came back from a holiday in Florida. I saw that letter about this meeting, and
Okay, well, the information that you received, there is contact information for the engineer. I'd encourage you to reach out to them to discuss the drain as it exists on your property, as it has since before you bought it, and also the impacts of the future works on your property. I'd be surprised if you saw any difference on your property.
Can you show her a number? Show her the number.
So you're,
Concession 5, lot 18 and 19.
yeah, so that's at the back end of the drain.
Yeah.
So you're,
Quite a piece from the work.
yeah.
Well, any
So you're
drainage-
quite a ways from the work, so there's gonna be no work on your property at all,
No.
right? There's no work proposed for back there? All the work is proposed on the south end of the drain?
The, or yellow.
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
So do you mean that this drainage is not going to affect my land?
Not negatively. It should be, you should see the exact same impact on your lands at that point of the drain on the map that's shown here. Whatever impact the drain provides today, it should be pretty similar in the future, because the point is to take the new water on the south end of the drain, just like was done with the drain to the south of Perth Street, which is the Arbuckle Municipal Drain. That was done a few years ago, improved to take on more water because of the changes in the area. If the Arbuckle Municipal Drain didn't impact your lands, it's unlikely that the Van Gaal Municipal Drain would.
Unlikely is not good enough for me.
There's no guarantees in life. But I would encourage you to speak to the engineer.
I still oppose it.
That's fair. I just encourage you to speak to the engineer. I'm not telling you to support it. I'm just saying
No.
you need to speak to the engineer.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Question? Any other question? Okay, thank
Oh,
you very much.
pardon.
No, there's no question.
Oh,
Merci
no.
beaucoup. Thank you.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Chris Tuteki. Chris?
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Come on, Chris.
I'm actually a fairly new resident of Richmond. I've only lived here for 4 years. But I moved in just down the road from the new development. When I moved in, that was essentially a flooded field. And I guess my question is, if I had bought that property personally, would City of Ottawa be asking my neighbors to help pay to drain it? I don't understand why, as my other neighbors have pointed out, they've purchased a large chunk of known wet property, but they're expecting us to pay for part of it. and potentially put other people's properties at risk to hold stormwater. So that would be my question.
Okay, just hold on, Chris. The question from
The
Councillor.
the answer is yes, because it's a municipal drain. So under the Drainage Act, any property that receives it's in the watershed of that municipal drain, they have to contribute to that municipal drain. So you see in this map here, there's 4 different municipal drains on this map. Actually, there's 4. So there's Arbuck Municipal Drain, the Van Gaal, the Hobbs Municipal Drain, and the Flowing Creek Municipal Drain. So any property in the watersheds of those drains, and this watershed for Arbuck or for Van Gaal is mapped out in the red line. Anyone that's water flows into that municipal drain is assessed a charge. And that's because municipal drains are created under the Drainage Act by private property owners who then apply by petition to get a drain created. In many cases, these are created 80, 90, 100 years ago for the purpose of agricultural uses, but they still exist. And we get a lot of these. The O'Keefe drain was one that was approved earlier today, where it's in the urban area now, but it still has to go through that process because it has a status under the Drainage Act. So you get those situations. So it wouldn't have mattered who applied. If Mr. Featherstone wanted to get an improvement to the municipal drain to benefit his farm, the landowners neighboring would pay. It's not necessarily just a developer issue. It's whoever owns land on the drain. If they require improvement to the drain, they have that right under Section 78 of the Drainage Act because the drain exists today, and they can seek those improvements, and that's how this process goes. And so,
Okay. Can I?
yeah, of course.
So I guess my second part would be, you guys just told another neighbor of mine there will likely be no change to those properties up. I don't want to use the word stream, but up drainage of it. So why are we expected to pay if there's likely to be no change? It
The
seems.
water flows there.
Mr. Chair, could I just add one
Yeah.
comment?
Yes, sir.
So the only person paying or the only landowner paying for this works is the developer.
Well,
You
future
might-
maintenance costs.
Future maintenance,
correct.
you may be assessed. That's always been the case, so, I mean, yeah.
Okay, well, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Our last speaker is Mr. Weber, Paul Weber, on behalf of the developer. Pretty sure, Mr. Weber, you know the drill. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, I'll do my best, but I have my doubts, I warn you. You do have written speaking notes, each of you, and with it a booklet with a beige cover which deals with the documents that support what I have to say. Briefly put, I asked what is before the committee. It's an application under Section 78 of the Drainage Act to improve a municipal drain. Perfectly normal course of business. Ottawa is the applicant, Ottawa is the approval authority, and away we go. But it's also part of a much larger planning process, and that had to do with the creation of an urban-type village in the village of Richmond. And it went through a community design plan, a secondary official plan. The boundaries of Richmond were expanded. This property was designated for residential development, and one of the impediments to it is that it lies within the 100-year floodplain established by the Conservation Authority. So the primary object of fixing the Van Gaal drain is to implement the desire of the city to see residential development at this location. If you would look at tab 3 in the book, we've included a sketch showing the property ownership, and effectively what happens is the west main drain is to be abandoned, and the Van Gaal municipal drain is to be located on the property boundary, running north and south. So it frees up the land for development, keeps the drain within the drainage basin, and in some respects keeps it within its current location. In red at the bottom is the Loach Elson property. So you'll see the drain is continuing in its current location, but with some modifications. The owner to the north and east is the Ralph property. They have consented to the drain. Mr. Featherstone's property is shown to the north. Again, no change to the existing course of the drain, just changes to the drain itself. So what we're about here, excuse me, and that's why I asked what is proposed and is it in the public interest. The implementation of the planning regime is very much in the public interest. The delays have been inexcusable. This is 12 years and counting. And if you look at the second bullet under what's before the committee, development was initiated as early as 2008. Everything was approved at the OMB in 2014. There's a memorandum of understanding, which I've said is 2015, but is in fact 2014, and I'll take you to that in due course. And that's where everyone agreed that this drain improvement should be undertaken. The city agreed that it would be done in 2015. So 4 years and counting. I woke up this morning to CFRA once again announcing that a floodplain warning had been issued for Richmond Village. Let's get at it. You know, if you're concerned about safety issues, let's get this drain relocated. And the most important thing about that, the reason for doing the rechannelization is that the floodplain will be shrunk. Where it now covers essentially all of the development lands, the floodplain will be realigned with the channel of the drain, so the development lands can all be developed. And in addition, with respect to Mr. Leach's property, Mr. Loach, I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman, his property is now in the floodplain in part. The barn, which he'll talk about, and the well are located in the floodplain. One of the results of this drain will be, again, to shrink the floodplain so that his land comes out of it. Amazingly, part of his house is actually in the restrictive area, the floodplain plus 15 meters. I don't know what that means, but he would certainly need permission from the RVCA to even fix his house. That'll all be solved by this rechannelization. It's good for environmental outcomes. The new channel has been designed as something like a meandering stream. There are heavy tree plantings proposed, which are set out in the engineer's report. There is a loss of some tree cover, admittedly, but there are invasive species in there, and the consultants tell me that this will be a major improvement. What you will now see is something that very much looks like a meandering creek, properly landscaped and taken care of, and it will be a huge improvement, and it will match people's vision for a village, not the usual trapezoidal ditch, you know, running across farmland. It's also
Okay.
designed to be largely self-cleaning.
Can you please wrap up? Your time is...
All right. In terms of process, Mr. Loach's spouse on September 14th, 2012 signed a consent. The drainage authorities attempted to impose a requirement for encroachment agreements, formal legal agreements. The city legal department turned that down. It continued in her ownership until 2016. If the target date of 2015 had been met, as set out in the MOU, it wouldn't be a problem at all, and it's still not a problem.
Mr. Weber, no, hold on, Mr. Weber, you're a lawyer, and you know we cannot comment on a legal document here, so stick to the drainage. If you're done, your time is out, but if you have something to add, please wrap it up.
All right. Because it's a drainage application, it does not require legal encroachment agreements.
Okay.
That was the opinion of Mr. Mark, and that's the basis on which this has gone forward. I want to go and deal then specifically with the objections that have been raised, particularly by Mr. Loach. This well is an alleged well in the sense that it's never been identified by
Your
anyone.
time is up, sir. Thank you, Mr. Weber.
I invite the committee to read the notes. If you have any questions, I'm here, the consultants are here, the owner is here, and we're prepared to deal with them.
Thank you, sir. Any question for Mr. Weber from the
Two
committee?
corrections.
Okay,
Sorry, I don't have questions. I just have two corrections. One, the village boundary has not been expanded probably in over 150 years for the village of Richmond. I just wanted to clarify, just because I think that misconception gets out there that the city expands boundaries just to grow. The village of Richmond has not expanded. Actually, if you look at the 1876 corporation limits of the village of Richmond, they aren't that far off from what they are today, except for the Cardell lands to the east.
But the development lands have been
The
expanded.
development lands have always been development lands. The lands in question have been slated for development as far back as the 1800s, because they were always within the corporation limits of the village of Richmond.
Thank you.
The second part, the floodplain warnings, the flood warnings for Richmond, this doesn't change that. Unless you're dredging the Jock and making the Rideau drain faster into the Ottawa River.
We don't want
This
that.
outlets into the Jock. The Jock is what's causing the flood warnings for Richmond. So I don't want any misbelief to be out there that all of a sudden this drainage work is going to make Richmond flood-proof, because it won't. Half of Richmond's in the floodplain, and that won't change. So I just want to, it's great that you come here and you present on behalf of your applicant. I just want to make sure that when you're presenting, it's all factual, because I don't really care for non-factual information.
And I agree with you. The land that is slated for development will be removed from the floodplain and therefore from any flood threat as a result of this work. Does it save the entire village? Of course not, but it permits development on this land.
That's fair, but
And
when you specifically
finally-
reference that you woke up in the morning and heard a floodplain warning, I mean,
Okay, we don't need to
it's-
And
debate.
finally,
this, okay?
It's
this
unnecessary.
is not a stormwater pond. A stormwater pond is to the south of this site. The subdivision is completely designed. This is a rechannelization of an existing drain,
I didn't ask you a question. I didn't ask you a question, so
which has
there's
the
nothing to
beneficial
respond to.
effect, which, if I may
Okay,
conclude,
we don't-
which has
any
the beneficial
question to
effect
Mr. Weber?
of removing it from the floodplain.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Now, we're going to turn our focus to staff, and I know some of my colleagues have questions for staff. And then, when we done question with staff, we're going to reset for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, perhaps, and have our meeting. So, question to staff. You have question for them, or you should ask them to, based on what they heard?
Yeah, could you just touch on just a couple points for the committee? Just speak to, again, to the, I know you mentioned it briefly, the assessments, how the assessment schedule works for this, and then how it will work ongoing, and how that is this report impacts the ongoing assessment schedule compared to, let's say, if no work was done at all?
Thank you. As David indicated, the full cost of the works at this time will be a cost associated and paid for by the developer. So there'll be no cost associated with the other property owners. But as indicated, and I think Councillor Moffat has explained well, is it today, if work was done on the existing drain, everybody within the watershed would be assessed a portion of the cost. That's the standard Municipal Drainage Act requirement. So what we have included in the report is an assessment schedule for future maintenance. But because of the fact that there's a significant portion of the cost for future maintenance charged directly to that green area on the map, is that in fact the amount charged to the other property owners would decrease. I don't have the exact amount, but it likely would be down to maybe 20% of what it would have been otherwise. But there's no cost at this time to any of the other property owners. And, you know, in answer to some of the questions about the property upstream lots 17, 18, 19, that water all ultimately drains to this. I know there's an argument by at least a couple of property owners that they don't think the water gets there, but under higher flow conditions, even through the hydro corridor, there are low areas, so water does find its way here. But it will have, as I agree, as an engineer, I don't give guarantees, but the work at this point is not going to impact the drainage that exists today up in lots 18, 19, 17.
Right, can you just speak to the process of landowners notification and over the last, because I mean, there was a comment made that this work was anticipated to be done in 2015. Well, if you only start the drainage process in 2015, there's no way you're going to get work done. Not in this day and age. These things take 3 or 4 years just to get through the application process. Can you just go through that process about what's the milestone steps and how notifications have worked?
Yes, well, again, we were appointed under Section 78 of the Drainage Act, which is initiation by council. And the main reason, I'll just take a little bit of time because I appreciate there's a couple of new people on the ARAC committee, but there's Section 4 of the Drainage Act is what's called a petition, which you might say is the more normal approach and is the approach that must be used for a brand-new drain. However, for an existing drain, if the improvements are required, there's a Section 78 which is initiated by council, generally at the request by property owners, and that's how this was initiated. So there is a requirement under Section 78 and Section 4 to have what's called an on-site meeting. So all of the property owners in the watershed are notified, and there's a meeting either on-site, or if it's the wintertime, sometimes it's in a warmer place. And at that point, the idea is for the engineer to basically get information on existing issues, and there may be items that we would not otherwise be aware of, but basically it's an information meeting. The only other meeting requirement officially is the one we're at today, in other words, with the meeting to consider. Now in this case, because it's driven by development of the lands, the engineering on the project has been done on behalf of the landowner, the developer. It's obviously been reviewed from a stormwater management point of view by the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority and the city's development approvals and the MOE. So all of these approvals are left in the hands of the developer to make sure they're in place. Of course, because ultimately we're responsible for what we do, we review the background information and the hydraulics to make sure we're comfortable with them, which we've done. The plans that have been done are from a detail point of view, are very good, and we've worked a lot over a period of time to get a drain that satisfies the environmental concerns about having more trees and more meanders and other fish-related issues, and making sure that it's something that can be maintained at a reasonable cost in the future. So that's took some time. The one area that has come up, and I don't know how to say this other than to say it, we've been assured several times over the course of this that all of the affected landowners had been contacted and there had been agreements in place. So that I guess what we really did is we took the work that had been done by others and incorporated under the requirements of the Drainage Act, because the existing drain was being changed. So that I guess in some other instances we would be a little more involved with some of those specific property owners, so that until we were contacted by Mr. Loach in particular, we were not aware that there wasn't an agreement, an understanding of what was going to happen in place.
All right, and just to confirm, the drainage area, has that been revised at all in this, through this plan?
Sorry?
The drainage area for the watershed of the Van Gaal, is it the same today as it was? Like, are you proposing it to be the same as it was?
It's pretty much the same as it was back in the, I think it was 2003 report that we had done on this area.
Excuse me. Is there any way, I have not looked at the site, but is there any way that the work in making this, constructing this retention or the storm drain can mitigate the damage or the amount of work that will affect Mr. Loach's property? Like, do you need to take down 14 trees? Do you need to take up that amount of the work? Does it have to take up as much as Mr. Loach is saying?
I'm really not in a position to answer that because we haven't looked at that specifically. I guess the only way that could occur would be to modify the proposed works to kind of eliminate work on Mr. Loach's property, leave it, well, relative sense, it may be some modifications, but not to the same extent, which would mean that perhaps the volume of storage which has been accommodated there would have to be accommodated elsewhere. But we haven't looked at that because we were kind of reacting to the plans and details that were provided to us.
Is it possible you could look at it? I think some of the problems that we're facing with this issue stem from Mr. Loach's concerns for his property.
I think it needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Meehan. Councillor DeRose?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have a couple of questions. First, Mr. Robinson, from my understanding right now, to your knowledge, there is only an issue on only one property that impacted with the assessment that the review that you've done into your engineer report. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Featherstone spoke earlier, and just for clarification on that, I mean, he presented his case, so you have that information before you. But what we ensured from the point of view of the design was that there was no more property taken from him other than there was a very narrow strip kind of between the what's the west main drain on that plan, but it was kind of between two drains, so that, but the top of the bank of the existing drain is basically ties into the top of the bank of the existing drain on his property. Now, what we did do, again, because in this case, because we had been informed through the city that there had not been an agreement come to with respect to that that any property he was losing, is that we gave an assessment for property lost in the report. And what we did is we used the existing information which we get from the city on the value of property, not of farmland, of whatever sales were. So that, in that case, we have allowed in the report an allowance for land lost as a result of the drain. This is part of the, again, the Drainage Act requirement.
So, so my second question will be, so the improvement that's going to happen to that municipal drain, that's going to be, it's going to be basically better for the future. So if we do that work right now, it's actually saving in the next, whatever, 5-6 years, if there is another issue somewhere else on that drainage network, that it's going to actually improve, and it's going to be, and to my knowledge, that no one will be assessed into this round other than a developer themselves.
Just the last question and answer would be, that's correct, is that all the costs are will be assessed to the developer, to the land owned by the developer. And that, in fact, because the improvements are being made there, that, yeah, the time until assessments or maintenance has to be done should be extended.
That's basically that's what I'm trying to clarify. But my question will be to to Mr. Ryan. Dave, when you do development into before you basically approve development and before you do anything, because I'm facing this right now in multiple different areas in our, not only in Councillor Moffat's ward, in my ward also, and I'm learning lots about that municipal drain, because there is a lots of misconception between stormwater, road ditches, and road culvert and municipal drain. So isn't it this is the proper way, if when we do development, to have an engineer report before we move forward? It's actually will minimize the impact in the future in the whole surrounding community. And that's what basically why I'm asking that. So that's the proper course. That's right now we're faced in the Cassidy drain in Metcalf. And that's what's impacting right now. We didn't let the developer pay for the engineer report. Now all the community are paying for the engineer report, and the outcome of the engineer report, it's going to be split in an assessment of all the residents. They're all going to pay for it. Just clarify that.
Yep, I can clarify that. Councillor, you're correct. So in an existing drainage works, which has status under provincial legislation, if there's a development or a major land use change within that watershed, it triggers an update to the engineer's report for just that reason, to ensure that land pays its fair share of the drain, of the improvements required to the drain.
And that's what's happening here right now.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. So with that, folks, we're gonna recess for 5 or maybe 10 minutes, and we'll come back to you. So, gonna need legal staff with us.